The alarm bells rang through the military base on Kepler 442b just after dawn. Captain Jake Morrison rolled out of his bunk and grabbed his uniform. The sound meant only one thing. Something had crashed in the forest outside their small outpost. "Captain, we're picking up a distress signal," called Tony Kim from the communications desk. His fingers moved quickly across the control panel. "It's coming from Sector 7, about 3 miles into the woods." Jake pulled on his boots and looked at the data on Tony's screen. The signal was weak but clear. Definitely from a ship and definitely not human. Their little base sat on the edge of known space where strange things happened more often than anyone liked to admit. "Get me a team ready," Jake ordered. "Lisa, grab your medical kit. This might be a rescue mission." Lisa Rodriguez looked up from her morning coffee. She was the best medic they had, even though she preferred working on humans rather than aliens. "How big is the crash site?" she asked. "Looks like a small transport," Tony replied. "Maybe a family ship or personal vessel." Jake gathered his team quickly. Besides Lisa and Tony, he brought 3 security officers and basic rescue equipment. The forest on Kepler 442b was thick and dark, with trees that grew taller than Earth skyscrapers. Strange animals lived in the shadows, but most avoided humans. The team moved through the forest for an hour before they smelled the smoke. Burning metal and something else, something organic and unfamiliar. They followed the smell until they found a clearing where trees had been knocked down in a straight line. The ship lay broken at the end of the crash path. It was smaller than Jake had expected, made of some kind of silver metal that seemed to shift color in the light. Strange symbols covered the hull, and parts of it were still glowing hot from the crash. "Zephyrian design," Tony said, checking his scanner. "Definitely a civilian transport." Jake knew about Zephyrians from the military briefings. They were a warrior species, tall, covered in scales, and very proud. They didn't usually travel in small ships like this one. They preferred big warships that could fight anything. "Life signs?" Jake asked. Lisa checked her medical scanner and frowned. "Something's alive in there, but the readings are weird, small, maybe injured." The team approached the wreck carefully. Part of the ship's side had been torn open in the crash, creating an opening big enough for a person to crawl through. Jake went first, with Lisa right behind him. Inside the ship, the air smelled like copper and ozone. Emergency lights flickered on and off, casting strange shadows on the walls. Jake could see that this had been a family ship. There were personal belongings scattered everywhere, pictures on the walls, and what looked like toys. "Over here," Lisa called softly. Jake turned to see her kneeling beside a small form in the corner of the main cabin. It was a Zephyrian, but much smaller than any he had seen in the military files. This one was barely the size of a human toddler, with scales that should have been bright blue but looked dull and gray. "It's a child," Lisa whispered. "A little girl, I think." The young Zephyrian was unconscious but breathing. Strange crystal-like growth stuck out from her scales, and they pulsed with a faint light. Lisa had never seen anything like it. "Is that normal for their species?" Jake asked. Lisa checked her medical database on her scanner. After a moment, her face went pale. "Neural cascade syndrome," she read. "Fatal in young Zephyrians if not treated within 48 hours. Jake looked around the rest of the ship. In the pilot's seat, he found an adult Zephyrian, probably the child's parent. The crash had been too much for them. They were alone now with a dying alien child. "We have to take her back to base," Lisa said. She was already preparing her portable medical kit. "I can stabilize her, but I need the full medical bay to treat this condition." "Are you sure?" Jake asked. "Protocol says we should contact Zephyrian authorities first. This could cause diplomatic problems." Lisa looked at the small form breathing weakly in her arms. The crystal growths were spreading, and the child's breathing was getting slower. "She'll be dead before any diplomatic ship gets here. I took an oath to help anyone who needs medical care." Jake made his decision. "Tony, contact base. Tell them we're bringing in a medical emergency, and send a message to the nearest Zephyrian diplomatic post. Let them know what happened. The trip back to base took longer with the injured child." Lisa worked constantly to keep the little Zephyrian stable. The crystal growth seemed to pulse in rhythm with the child's heartbeat, and touching them made Lisa's hands tingle strangely. When they reached the base, Dr. Amanda Wells was waiting at the medical bay. She was the chief medical officer, and she did not look happy. "Captain, do you understand what you're doing?" Dr. Wells asked as they carried the child inside. "We don't have authorization to treat alien civilians. This could be considered an act of war by their people. Look at her, Lisa said, laying the child on the medical table. She's dying. Would you let a human child die because of paperwork? Dr. Wells looked at the small Zephyrian. The crystal growths had spread further during the trip, and now they covered most of her arms and chest. The child's breathing was very shallow. What's your assessment? Dr. Wells asked Lisa. Neural cascade syndrome. It's like her nervous system is growing new pathways too fast. The crystals are part of it somehow. If we don't stop the process, her brain will overload. Dr. Wells checked her own scanners and databases. Everything confirmed Lisa's diagnosis. The child had maybe 12 hours left. Isolation room 3, Dr. Wells decided. Full quarantine protocols. I'll contact the medical board, but we treat her first and deal with the politics later. As they moved the child to the isolation room, Jake noticed something strange. The security guards who helped carry the medical equipment seemed reluctant to leave. Even after the child was settled in the medical bed, they found reasons to stay nearby. That's odd, Tony said. He was standing by the observation window watching the medical team work. I should get back to communications, but I don't want to leave. Jake felt it too. A strange pull to stay close to the medical bay. It was like an instinct he couldn't explain. The child was just lying there unconscious, but something about her presence made him want to protect her. Dr. Wells began the treatment procedures while Lisa monitored the child's vital signs. The crystal growths continued to pulse with that strange light, and Jake noticed that everyone in the medical bay seemed calmer than usual. Captain, Tony called from the communications station. I'm getting responses to our message. The Zephyrian Diplomatic Corps wants to know more details. And sir, there's a battle fleet changing course toward our position. Jake felt his stomach drop. A Zephyrian battle fleet meant serious trouble. But looking at the small form on the medical table, he knew they had made the right choice. Some things were more important than following protocol. The child stirred slightly in her sleep, and the crystal growths pulsed brighter for a moment. Jake felt that strange protective instinct grow stronger. Outside the medical bay, more base personnel were gathering without being ordered to do so. Dr. Amanda Wells had treated many different species during her military career, but never a Zephyrian child. As she worked on the small patient, she noticed something very unusual happening around the medical bay. The child lay unconscious on the medical table, her scaled skin a dull gray color that meant serious illness in Zephyrians. The crystal growths had spread across her chest and arms, pulsing with a soft blue light. Dr. Wells carefully ran her scanners over the formations, trying to understand what was happening. Heart rate is stabilizing, Lisa reported from the monitoring station. Blood pressure is still low but improving. As Dr. Wells worked, she became aware of a low humming sound. At first, she thought it was coming from the medical equipment, but then she realized the sound was coming from the child herself. It was barely audible, more felt than heard, like standing next to a large engine. Are you hearing that? Lisa asked. I hear it, Dr. Wells replied. It might be part of her species' healing process. What Dr. Wells didn't expect was how the sound affected the humans around the medical bay. Within minutes of the humming starting, she felt a strange sense of calm wash over her. Her usual stress about treating an unknown alien condition faded away, replaced by a warm feeling of protectiveness toward the small patient. Security Chief Ryan Parker had been standing guard outside the medical bay since they brought the child in. His job was to make sure no unauthorized personnel entered the area. But as the minutes passed, he found himself unable to leave his post even for a break. Parker, you've been standing there for 3 hours, Captain Morrison said when he came to check on the situation. Get someone to relieve you. I'm fine here, sir, Ryan replied. He couldn't explain why, but the idea of leaving the medical bay made him uncomfortable. It felt wrong, like abandoning someone who needed protection. Captain Morrison looked at his security chief with concern. Ryan was normally very professional about following duty rotations, but now he seemed almost glued to his position outside the medical bay doors. Is everything all right? Morrison asked. Yes, sir. Just want to make sure the area stays secure. Ryan's hand rested on his weapon, but not in a threatening way, more like he was ready to defend something precious. Morrison walked into the medical bay to check on Dr. Wells's progress. The moment he stepped through the door, he felt it too, that strange, warm feeling of protectiveness. Looking at the small Zephyrian child on the medical table, he felt like he was looking at something that needed to be kept safe at all costs. How is she doing? Morrison asked, his voice automatically becoming quieter near the child. Better than expected, Dr. Wells replied. I've managed to slow down the crystal growth, but I'm still not sure what's causing it. According to our medical database, neural cascade syndrome is always fatal in young Zephyrians. Maybe our database is wrong, Lisa suggested. We don't know much about their biology. Dr. Wells continued her research while monitoring the child's condition. The crystal formations were definitely not random. They formed complex patterns across the child's scales, almost like circuit boards made of living crystal. When she touched them gently with her scanner, they pulsed brighter for a moment. Interesting, Dr. Wells muttered. These formations seem to be connected to her nervous system, but they're not damaging it. They're enhancing it somehow. Outside the medical bay, more base personnel were gathering. Sergeant Chris Murphy brought his paperwork to the hallway so he could work near the medical area. Lieutenant Beth Turner volunteered for extra shifts that would keep her close to the medical wing. Even the base cook, Mary Johnson, found reasons to bring meals to the staff working near the medical bay. Tony Kim was still at his communication station, but he had moved his equipment so he could see the medical bay from his desk. When Captain Morrison asked him about responses from the Zephyrian authorities, Tony's report was troubling. Sir, I've been in contact with the Zephyrian diplomatic ship Honor's Edge. They want immediate details about the child's condition and our intentions. And sir, there's a full battle fleet moving in our direction. Estimated arrival time is 18 hours. Morrison felt a chill. A Zephyrian battle fleet meant they were taking this situation very seriously. What's their tone like?
Hostile?
Hard to tell through the translators, but they're demanding answers. The child must be important to them. Back in the medical bay, Dr. Wells made a breakthrough in her research. Lisa, look at this, she said, pointing to her computer screen. I've been comparing the child's brain scans to adult Zephyrian neural patterns from our database. What did you find? The crystal formations aren't a disease at all. They're a natural development stage. Look at these adult Zephyrian brain scans. They all show similar crystal structures but fully integrated into their nervous systems. Lisa looked at the data with amazement. So she's not sick. She's growing up. Exactly. But here's the strange part. According to this research, young Zephyrians can only complete this development safely when they're surrounded by a protective community. The process requires them to form emotional bonds with caregivers. That would explain why everyone wants to stay near her, Lisa said. Dr. Wells nodded. The humming sound, the feeling of protectiveness, it's all connected. She's not just healing, she's bonding with us. As if responding to their conversation, the child stirred slightly on the medical table. Her eyes opened for the first time since the crash, large golden eyes that seemed much older than her small body suggested. She looked around the medical bay with curiosity rather than fear. When her gaze fell on Dr. Wells, the child made a soft sound. Not quite a word, but clearly an attempt at communication. The crystal formations on her body pulsed brighter, and the humming sound grew slightly louder. Hello, little one, Dr. Wells said softly. You're safe here. The child seemed to understand, even though Dr. Wells was speaking in human language. She relaxed back onto the medical table and closed her eyes again, but now her breathing was deeper and more peaceful. Outside the medical bay, the gathering of base personnel had grown larger. Nearly a quarter of the base's population was now finding reasons to work or rest near the medical wing. Captain Morrison tried to order people back to their regular duties, but found that even he didn't want to leave the area. This is highly irregular, Morrison said to himself, but he couldn't bring himself to enforce normal discipline. Something about the situation felt too important to disrupt. Ryan Parker remained at his post outside the medical bay doors. He had been joined by 3 other security officers who had volunteered for extra duty shifts. None of them could explain why, but they all felt that guarding the medical bay was the most important job on the base. Parker, Morrison said, approaching the security team. Have you eaten today? Sergeant Murphy brought us sandwiches, sir. We're fine. Morrison looked at his security team. They were alert and professional, but there was something different about them. They seemed more focused than usual, like they were protecting something truly valuable. Inside the medical bay, Dr. Wells continued monitoring the child's development. The crystal formations had stopped spreading and were now glowing with a steady, soft light. All of the child's vital signs were improving rapidly. It's remarkable, Dr. Wells told Lisa. Her body is healing faster than I've ever seen in any species. And the neural development is accelerating too. How long until the process is complete? Lisa asked. Dr. Wells checked her calculations. If the pattern continues, maybe 2 more days. But that's cutting it close with the Zephyrian fleet arriving. The child opened her eyes again and looked directly at Dr. Wells. This time, when she made her soft sound, Dr. Wells could swear she heard something like "thank you" in the alien voice. "You're welcome, sweetheart," Dr. Wells replied, gently touching the child's hand. The moment their skin made contact, Dr. Wells felt a warm sensation flow up her arm. The child's crystal formations pulsed once very brightly, and then settled into a steady, peaceful glow. Outside the medical bay, every human on the base suddenly felt the same warm sensation. It lasted only a moment, but it left them all with an even stronger sense of protectiveness toward the small alien child. Captain Morrison realized they were facing something completely beyond their training or experience. Whatever was happening with this child was affecting his entire command, and a Zephyrian battle fleet was on its way to deal with the situation. But looking through the observation window at the small form on the medical table, Morrison knew that protecting her was the right thing to do, no matter what happened next. The news about the approaching Zephyrian fleet spread through the base like wildfire. Captain Morrison called an emergency meeting in the main briefing room, but when the time came, only half the expected officers showed up. The rest couldn't bring themselves to leave the area around the medical bay. "This is a problem," Morrison said to his assembled staff. "A Zephyrian battle fleet isn't coming here for a friendly visit. They probably think we've kidnapped the child." Lieutenant Colonel Patricia Stone, the base's second-in-command, looked at the tactical display showing the incoming ships. 12 heavy cruisers and a flagship. That's enough firepower to turn this entire planet into glass. "What do we know about Zephyrian customs regarding their children?" Morrison asked. Tony Kim, who had managed to attend the meeting despite his strong urge to stay near the medical bay, consulted his database. "Not much, sir. Zephyrians are very private about their family structures. We know they're organized into clans, and children are considered extremely valuable to their society." "Valuable enough to start a war over?" Stone asked. Apparently, Morrison felt a headache coming on. The situation was getting more complicated by the hour, and the strange compulsion affecting his crew wasn't helping. He had tried to order people back to their normal duties, but found that even his most disciplined soldiers couldn't focus on anything except protecting the child in the medical bay. "Sir," said Sergeant Chris Murphy, who had somehow managed to bring his security reports to the briefing room, "what if we're looking at this wrong? What if the child isn't just any Zephyrian?" "What do you mean?" "Well, the fleet response suggests she's very important. Maybe nobility, or their equivalent of royalty." Morrison considered this. It would explain the massive military response, but it also made their situation much more dangerous. If they were harboring some kind of Zephyrian princess, the diplomatic consequences could be severe. After the meeting, Morrison walked back toward the medical bay. He told himself he was just checking on the patient's condition, but he knew the real reason. Like everyone else on the base, he felt drawn to stay close to the child. The sight that greeted him outside the medical bay was unprecedented in his military career. Nearly 200 base personnel had set up an impromptu camp in the corridors around the medical wing. They had brought sleeping bags, field rations, portable workstations, and personal belongings. It looked like a refugee camp, except everyone was there by choice. "Sergeant Parker," Morrison called to his security chief, who was still maintaining his post outside the medical bay doors. "How long has this been going on?"
"Started about 6 hours ago, sir."
"People just kept bringing their stuff down here. They're all doing their jobs, just doing them here instead of in their regular work areas." Morrison looked around at his personnel. Engineers were running diagnostics on portable computers. Cooks were preparing meals in the hallway, and administrative staff were filing reports from temporary desks set up against the walls. It was completely against regulations, but somehow it was working. "Has anyone left their post or failed to complete their duties?" Morrison asked. "No, sir. If anything, people are working harder than usual. They just want to work here." Inside the medical bay, Dr. Wells was making remarkable discoveries about the child's condition. The crystal formations were now glowing with complex patterns that seemed to pulse in rhythm with the activity outside the medical bay. "Lisa, look at this," Dr. Wells said, pointing to her neural scanner. "The child's brain activity is increasing, but not in a random way. She's somehow aware of everyone outside. You mean she knows we're all here? More than that. I think she's connected to us somehow. When Sergeant Murphy got upset about a supply report an hour ago, her stress indicators spiked. When Mary Johnson started singing while she cooked, the child's neural patterns showed increased happiness. Lisa looked at the readings with amazement. She's empathically linked to the people around her. That's my theory. And I think it's intentional. Look at this research I found in the Zephyrian Cultural Database. Dr. Wells showed Lisa a file about Zephyrian social structures. Young Zephyrians of certain genetic lines develop what they call pack bonding abilities. It allows them to form emotional connections with large groups of individuals, creating instinctive loyalty and protectiveness. Like what's happening to our crew. Exactly. The child isn't just healing from her injuries. She's going through a natural development phase that requires her to bond with a protective community. Without that bonding, Zephyrian children with this genetic trait don't survive to adulthood. Lisa understood the implications immediately, so she's not making us feel protective on purpose. It's a survival mechanism, and if the research is correct, children who successfully complete this bonding process grow up to become leaders of their people. The ability to inspire loyalty and protectiveness in others makes them natural commanders. Dr. Wells paused her research to check on the child directly. The small Zephyrian was awake again, looking around the medical bay with curious golden eyes. When she saw Dr. Wells approaching, she made a happy sound and reached out with one small, scaled hand. "Hello again, little one," Dr. Wells said, gently taking the child's hand. "How are you feeling?" The child responded with a series of soft sounds that almost sounded like words. The universal translator couldn't make sense of them, but Dr. Wells felt like she understood anyway. The child was trying to say thank you and safe and family. "We're taking care of you," Dr. Wells assured her. "You're safe here." The child's crystal formations pulsed brighter for a moment, and Dr. Wells felt that warm, protective sensation flow through her again. But this time she also felt something else: gratitude. The child was somehow projecting her appreciation for the care she was receiving. Outside the medical bay, the impromptu community of base personnel felt the same warm sensation. There was a collective sigh of contentment from the gathered humans, as if they had all received confirmation that they were doing something important and right. Captain Morrison was reviewing tactical options in his temporary command post set, up in the hallway when Tony Kim approached with urgent news. "Sir, I've been monitoring communications from the Zephyrian fleet. I think I figured out who the child is." "Go ahead." "Her name is Zelthira, and she's the granddaughter of Admiral Kethvar, the fleet commander heading our way. But here's the important part. She's what they call an alpha heir. According to their cultural database, that makes her a potential future leader of their entire species." Morrison felt his stomach drop. They weren't just harboring any Zephyrian child. They had the equivalent of an alien princess, and her grandfather was coming with enough firepower to destroy their entire planet. "What's the fleet's estimated arrival time?" Morrison asked. 14 hours, sir. And sir, I've been analyzing their communications patterns. They're not coming to negotiate. They think we've kidnapped Alpha Heir Zelthira for political leverage. Morrison looked through the observation window at the small child on the medical table. Zelthira was playing with a small toy that Dr. Wells had given her, making happy sounds as she moved it around. She looked like any child recovering from illness, not like someone whose rescue might start an interstellar war. "Any response to our diplomatic messages?" Morrison asked. "They're demanding immediate proof that the child is unharmed and our terms for her release. They won't believe our explanation about the rescue." Lieutenant Colonel Stone approached with her own tactical assessment. "Sir, I've run the numbers. Even if we had advance warning and full defensive preparations, we couldn't hold off a Zephyrian battle fleet. Our best weapons wouldn't scratch their shields." Morrison nodded grimly. Military action wasn't an option. They would have to find a diplomatic solution. But how do you negotiate with someone who thinks you're holding their grandchild hostage? Inside the medical bay, Dr. Wells was monitoring Zelthira's continued development. The crystal formations had grown more complex over the past few hours, creating intricate patterns that seemed to shift and change in the light. The child's neural activity was also increasing, suggesting that her mental development was accelerating. "Her empathic abilities are getting stronger," Dr. Wells told Lisa. "I think she's starting to understand not just our emotions, but our thoughts as well." Is that normal for her species? According to the research, alpha heirs develop enhanced empathic abilities during their transformation. It helps them understand and lead diverse groups of individuals. As if responding to their conversation, Zelthyra looked directly at Dr. Wells and made a sound that was clearly an attempt at human speech. "Doctor," she said carefully, her voice high and musical. Dr. Wells smiled with delight. "Yes, I'm a doctor." "Can you say your name?" "Zelthyra," the child said, pronouncing each syllable carefully. Then she pointed toward the door and said, "Family." Dr. Wells realized that Zelthyra was referring to all the humans gathered outside the medical bay. In her developing mind, the base personnel who had been protecting and caring for her had become her family. The implications were staggering. When Admiral Cathvar arrived, he would find his granddaughter bonded to a community of humans who couldn't bear the thought of letting her go. And based on the Zephyrian battle fleet dropped out of hyperspace exactly when Tony Kim predicted they would. 12 massive warships appeared in orbit around Kepler 442b, their dark hulls bristling with weapons that could reduce the human outpost to atoms in seconds. Captain Morrison stood in the base's communications center, watching the tactical display with a mixture of fear and determination. Around him, his skeleton crew worked at their stations while the majority of base personnel remained camped outside the medical bay, unwilling to leave Zelthyra's side. "Sir, incoming transmission from the flagship," Tony reported. "Audio and visual. Put it through." The main screen flickered to life, showing the bridge of a Zephyrian warship. At the center stood a massive figure that could only be Admiral Cathvar. The Zephyrian commander was nearly 8 feet tall, his scales a deep blue-black color marked with silver scars from countless battles. His golden eyes burned with cold fury. "Human commander," Cathvar's voice rumbled through the universal translator. "I am Admiral Cathvar of the Zephyrian Empire. You are holding my granddaughter against her will. Release her immediately or face the consequences." Morrison stepped forward, trying to project calm authority despite the fear gnawing at his stomach. "Admiral Cathvar, I am Captain Jake Morrison. Your granddaughter was injured in a ship crash. We rescued her and have been providing medical care. She is safe and recovering well." "Lies," Cathvar roared. "Zephyrian children do not travel alone. You killed her parents and took her for your own purposes. What are your demands?" "Admiral, please, there are no demands. We found her injured and alone at the crash site. Her parents had already died in the accident. We were trying to save her life." Cathvar's expression showed he didn't believe a word of it. "Humans are known for their deception. You expect me to believe you rescued an alpha heir from pure kindness? What strategic advantage do you hope to gain?" Morrison realized that the cultural gap between their species was even wider than he had thought. The idea that humans would risk diplomatic trouble to save a dying alien child was apparently incomprehensible to the Zephyrian military mind. "Admiral, I'm going to send you our medical records and video footage from the rescue. Perhaps that will help you understand what really happened." "I will examine your fabricated evidence," Cathvar replied coldly. "But know this, human. If my granddaughter has been harmed in any way, your entire species will pay the price." The transmission ended, leaving Morrison staring at a blank screen. He had expected the conversation to go badly, but Cathvar's absolute certainty that they were lying made diplomatic resolution seem impossible. "Sir," Tony said quietly, "I'm reading massive energy buildup in their weapon systems. They're preparing to fire. How long do we have? Unknown. But sir, I'm also detecting smaller ships launching from the fleet. It looks like a boarding party." Morrison felt his heart sink. A Zephyrian boarding party meant they were past the point of peaceful negotiation. "All hands prepare for hostile boarding action. But remember, no one fires first. We're still trying to resolve this diplomatically." In the medical bay, Dr. Wells was monitoring Zelthyra's reaction to the sudden tension throughout the base. The child's empathic abilities had grown stronger over the past day, and she was clearly sensing the fear and stress of the humans around her. "She knows something's wrong," Lisa observed. "Look at her neural patterns." Zelthyra was sitting up on the medical table, her golden eyes wide with concern. The crystal formations on her scales were pulsing rapidly, and she was making soft, distressed sounds. When the base's alarm system activated to signal the incoming boarding party, she began to cry, not with the wailing of a human child, but with a high, musical keening that seemed to express pure anguish. "It's okay, sweetheart. Dr. Wells said, moving to comfort the child. "We're not going to let anyone hurt you." But Zelthyra's distress wasn't about her own safety. Through her empathic connection to the base personnel, she could feel their fear about the approaching Zephyrian warriors. In her developing mind, these humans had become her pack, her family, and now they were in danger because of her. Outside the medical bay, the gathered base personnel felt Zelthyra's distress like a physical pain. The protective instinct that had drawn them to guard her intensified into something fiercer. They weren't just protecting a child anymore. They were protecting one of their own. Sergeant Ryan Parker stood at the medical bay doors, checking his weapon for the 10th time in 5 minutes. "Nobody gets past this point," he told his security team. "I don't care if it's her own grandfather." The Zephyrian boarding shuttles landed outside the base perimeter. Through the external cameras, Morrison watched as 12 Zephyrian warriors emerged from the craft. They were fully armed and armored, moving with the deadly grace of elite soldiers. Each one was nearly as tall as Admiral Kethvar, their scales gleaming with the dark blue-black color of mature Zephyrian warriors. "Sir, they're demanding entry to the base," Tony reported. "The lead warrior says they're here to assess our hostage situation and retrieve the Alpha Heir. Tell them they can enter peacefully, but their weapons stay outside." "This is a medical facility, not a war zone." The response came back quickly. "They refuse to disarm. They say they don't trust human promises." Morrison made a difficult decision. "Open the main doors. Let them in, but track their movements. I want to know exactly where they go." The Zephyrian warriors entered the base with military precision, their heavy footsteps echoing through the corridors. They moved as a unit, checking each room and corridor for threats. When they reached the main hallway leading to the medical bay, they stopped. The sight that greeted them was unlike anything they had expected. Instead of a heavily guarded prison area, they found nearly 200 humans sitting quietly in the hallway. Men and women of all ages and ranks, some working at portable stations, others simply sitting and waiting. None of them were armed, but all of them looked up at the Zephyrian warriors with expressions of calm determination. "Humans," the lead warrior said in accented but clear human language. "We are here for the Alpha Heir." "Move aside." Nobody moved. Instead, Sergeant Murphy stood up slowly, his hands visible and empty. "She's in the medical bay receiving treatment for her injuries. If you want to see her, you'll have to go through us." The Zephyrian warrior was clearly confused by this response. "You would fight to keep a hostage? This makes no sense." "She's not a hostage," Dr. Wells said, emerging from the medical bay. "She's a patient. And if you want to see her, you're welcome to, but you'll remove your weapons first. This is a place of healing." The lead warrior looked at Dr. Wells with suspicion. "You are the one responsible for the Alpha Heir's care?" "I am. And she's doing very well thanks to the care she's received from everyone here." Behind the warriors, Captain Morrison approached with his own small security detail. "I suggest we resolve this calmly. Your granddaughter is safe and healthy. You can see her for yourself." The lead warrior spoke into his communicator in rapid Zephyrian. After a moment, he received a response. "Admiral Kethvar demands immediate access to the Alpha Heir. You will provide this access now." "Of course," Dr. Wells replied. "But first you need to understand something about her condition. She's going through a natural development phase called neural cascade. She's formed empathic bonds with the people who have been caring for her. Sudden separation from them could be psychologically harmful." The Zephyrian warriors exchanged glances. It was clear they knew something about neural cascade, even if they hadn't expected to encounter it in this situation. "Impossible," the lead warrior said. "Neural cascade requires a proper pack structure. Humans cannot provide adequate bonding for an Alpha Heir." "Come and see for yourself," Dr. Wells said simply. She led the group toward the medical bay, followed by the Zephyrian warriors and Captain Morrison's team. As they walked, the gathered base personnel remained seated but alert, ready to act if the situation turned violent. At the medical bay doors, Sergeant Parker and his security team stepped aside but remained close. The Zephyrian warriors entered the medical facility cautiously, their weapons ready but not raised. Inside the medical bay, Zelthyra was sitting on the edge of the medical table, her legs swinging back and forth like any child waiting for something interesting to happen. When she saw the Zephyrian warriors, her eyes widened with recognition and she made an excited sound. "Uncle Vorth," she said in Zephyrian, holding out her arms toward the lead warrior. The warrior's fierce expression softened completely. He holstered his weapon and moved toward the child, speaking to her in rapid musical Zephyrian. After a moment, he turned to Dr. Wells with confusion clear on his face. She says you have been taking care of her. She says the humans are her new pack. That's correct, Dr. Wells replied. She's been forming bonds with our people as part of her neural development. It's a natural process. The warrior, apparently Zelthyra's uncle, looked around the medical bay at the humans present. For the first time since entering the base, he seemed uncertain about what to do next. This is not what we expected to find, he admitted. Admiral Kethvar must be informed immediately. Admiral Kethvar materialized in the base's main hangar bay 2 hours later, arriving by personal transport with only a small honor guard. The massive Zephyrian commander looked around the human facility with suspicious eyes, clearly expecting to find evidence of deception or military preparation. Instead, he found Captain Morrison waiting with a small welcoming committee and no weapons in sight. Admiral Kethvar, Morrison said, stepping forward with a respectful bow. Welcome to our base. Your granddaughter is eager to see you. Kethvar studied the human captain for a long moment. His nephew Vorth had sent a detailed report about the situation, but the admiral was still struggling to accept what he had been told. The idea that soft-skinned humans could successfully care for an alpha heir during neural cascade seemed impossible. Take me to her, Kethvar said simply. The walk through the base corridors was unlike anything the admiral had expected. Instead of military checkpoints and armed guards, he found humans going about their daily business with calm efficiency. Many of them nodded respectfully as he passed, but none seemed afraid or hostile. When they reached the medical wing, Kethvar stopped in amazement. The hallway was filled with humans who had clearly been living there for days. They had created a peaceful community around the medical bay, with workstations, sleeping areas, and even a small kitchen set up in the corridor. Why are they here? Kethvar asked. They want to be close to Zelthyra, Morrison explained. She's formed empathic bonds with most of our personnel. They feel protective of her. This is impossible. Humans do not have the pack instincts necessary for proper alpha bonding. Dr. Wells emerged from the medical bay to greet them. Admiral, I'm Dr. Amanda Wells. I've been caring for your granddaughter. She's made remarkable progress. Kethvar looked down at the small human female who had been responsible for his granddaughter's care. You are a healer? Yes, sir. And I have to say, Zelthyra is one of the most remarkable patients I've ever treated. Her recovery has been extraordinary. Show me. Dr. Wells led the group into the medical bay where Zelthyra was playing with a puzzle toy that Sergeant Murphy had made for her. When she saw her grandfather, her face lit up with joy. Grandfather, she called out in Zephyrian, jumping down from the medical table and running to him. Kethvar knelt down and caught his granddaughter in his massive arms, speaking to her in rapid, emotional Zephyrian. As they talked, Dr. Wells watched the Admiral's expression change from suspicion to confusion to amazement. She says the humans saved her life, Kethvar said finally, looking up at Dr. Wells. She says they became her pack during the healing time. That's correct. The neural cascade process requires community bonding to complete safely. Your granddaughter found that community here. Kethvar stood up, still holding Zelthyra in his arms. For the first time since arriving, he seemed uncertain rather than angry. This should not be possible. Alpha heirs have specific bonding requirements. Humans are not pack-oriented beings. Maybe you don't know humans as well as you think, Dr. Wells said gently. We might not have pack instincts like your species, but we do have strong protective instincts toward children. Any children. To demonstrate her point, Dr. Wells showed Kethvar the medical records from Zelthyra's treatment. Look at these duty logs. Every person who worked on your granddaughter's care volunteered for extra shifts. No one had to order them to stay close to her. They chose to do it. Kethvar studied the records with growing amazement. The data showed round-the-clock care from dozens of different humans all working together to ensure Zelthyra's recovery and comfort. Why? He asked finally. What did you hope to gain from this? Captain Morrison stepped forward. Nothing, Admiral. We found an injured child and we did what anyone with a conscience would do. We helped her, but she is not your species. You risk diplomatic complications, resource expenditure, potential military conflict. For what purpose? Morrison looked at Zelthyra, who was watching the conversation with intelligent golden eyes. Because she needed help. That's enough. Kethvar was quiet for a long moment, processing this concept. In Zephyrian culture, actions were always taken for strategic advantage or clan loyalty. The idea of helping someone simply because they needed help was foreign to his understanding. "Grandfather," Zelthyra said in her musical voice, speaking in accented but clear human language. "They are good people. They made me feel safe when I was scared." The Admiral looked at his granddaughter with surprise. "You have learned their language?" "Dr. Wells taught me, and Sergeant Parker taught me about security procedures, and Mary showed me how to cook human food." Zelthyra pointed to different humans in the medical bay as she spoke, clearly remembering each person who had helped care for her. Kethvar followed his granddaughter's gestures, seeing the humans she had bonded with. Each face showed genuine affection for the small Zephyrian child. These weren't guards or handlers, they were people who had come to care about Zelthyra as an individual. "The neural cascade is complete?" Kethvar asked Dr. Wells. "Nearly. Another day or two and the crystal formations will be fully integrated. She'll have developed her full alpha empathic abilities. And the bonding, the pack connections she has formed." Dr. Wells chose her words carefully. "Those bonds are strong, Admiral. Breaking them suddenly could be harmful to her psychological development. But they don't have to be permanent. As she grows older, she'll be able to form new bonds while maintaining positive memories of these early connections." Kethvar understood the implication. His granddaughter could return to Zephyrian space, but the humans who had cared for her would always hold a special place in her mind and heart. "This is unprecedented," he said finally. "An alpha heir bonded to aliens during neural cascade. The Council of Clans will be very interested in this development." "Sir," Tony Kim said, approaching the group carefully, "I've been monitoring communications from your fleet. They're requesting status updates." Kethvar looked at the human communications officer. "Tell my ships to stand down from combat readiness. There will be no military action here." The relief in the room was palpable. Captain Morrison felt tension he hadn't realized he was carrying leave his shoulders. "However," Kethvar continued, "this situation requires careful consideration. An alpha heir with bonds to alien species could have significant implications for Zephyrian-human relations." "What kind of implications?" Morrison asked. Kethvar looked down at Zelthyra, who was now sitting in Dr. Wells' lap while the doctor checked her crystal formations. "Alpha heirs who successfully complete neural cascade become clan leaders. They remember everyone who helped them during the bonding process. If Zelthyra grows up to lead a Zephyrian clan, she will always remember the humans who protected her when she was vulnerable." The full meaning of his words sank in slowly. Zelthyra wasn't just any Zephyrian child. She was potentially a future leader of their species, and she had formed her first leadership bonds with humans. "Grandfather," Zelthyra said, looking up at Kethvar, "can my human family visit me sometimes? I want to show them my real home." Kethvar looked around the medical bay at the humans who had risked so much to save his granddaughter's life. For the first time in his long military career, he was seeing members of another species not as potential enemies or allies of convenience, but as individuals capable of genuine kindness and sacrifice. "Yes, little star," he said finally. "I think that can be arranged." 2 days later, the Zephyrian fleet prepared to depart with Zelthyra aboard the flagship. The crystal formations on her scales had completed their development, creating beautiful patterns that marked her as a fully developed alpha heir. Her empathic abilities were now mature, allowing her to sense and influence the emotions of those around her with conscious control, rather than instinctive broadcasting. The entire base personnel gathered in the hangar bay to see her off. There were tears from many of the humans who had become attached to the small alien child, but also pride in knowing they had helped save her life and given her the foundation she needed to become a leader of her people. "Thank you," Zelthyra said to each person individually, touching their hands in the traditional Zephyrian farewell gesture. When she reached Dr. Wells, she hugged the doctor tightly. "Thank you for making me well." "Thank you for letting us help," Dr. Wells replied. "Take care of yourself, little one." Admiral Kethvar approached Captain Morrison for a final conversation. "Your people have shown honor and compassion that I did not expect to find among aliens. This will not be forgotten." "We just did what was right," Morrison replied. "Perhaps, but not all species would have made the same choice." Kethvar paused for a moment. I am recommending to the Council of Clans that formal diplomatic relations be established between our peoples. You have proven yourselves worthy of trust. As the Zephyrian ships departed, they left behind a small diplomatic station and a permanent communication link. The human outpost on Kepler 442b had become the first official point of contact between humanity and the Zephyrian Empire. Captain Morrison stood in the hangar bay long, after the ships had disappeared into hyperspace. The base felt different now, quieter but also somehow larger. They had started as a small research outpost on the edge of known space. Now they were the foundation of a new alliance between species.